Hi, Dr. Phillip. Thank you so much for joining us this week for Mind Matters.
Hi, Bel. Hi, JD. How are you guys doing?
How are you feeling?
Oh, good. Good. Not too bad. I'm managing to get exercise every day, which I love.
That's good.
Really?
Yeah.
We can't wait to see those abs.
Uh,
Speaking of exercise, our first article has to do with exercising, but it has
Yeah.
to do more of to do with yoga, and how I know a lot of people actually advocate yoga as a treatment, quote unquote, for some mental health issues. And what I'm wondering about here is like, why is yoga such a great exercise for those suffering from mental disorders?
Well, actually, there's this study that analyzed about 19 different studies in different countries looking at the benefits of yoga. Generally, treatment guidelines for things like depression and anxiety include physical activity, exercise, diet, a whole range of things, not just medication or therapy alone. And yoga incorporates other things in the whole process. There are other therapies that are incorporated in, which are very beneficial for depression and anxiety, like meditation, mindfulness, and breathing exercises. And these are things that I typically advise my patients that they should get exercise, but they should also look at meditation and mindfulness and breathing. And now you got all this incorporated into one, and especially in the movement type yogas, they also incorporate exercise as well. So you've got everything put into one. So the benefits are maybe fourfold. But the studies that have been done so far didn't specifically look at yoga as a treatment on its own for major depression, because there's depression symptoms. You get depressed and sad and all that. But if it's an illness, then it's major depression. And then you have different categories of major depression. You have mild, moderate, and severe. And we know with mild major depression, most people, just a change in lifestyle, some meditation, some mindfulness, exercise, that sometimes is sufficient to help them get better.
Okay. But I mean, I thought the idea of exercising was to sweat it out, for those endorphins to flow. But every time I do yoga, I don't seem to sweat that much unless it's like in a hot room and I'm doing hot yoga.
Right. Yeah, I don't know about hot yoga in a hot room, but there are many things that actually stimulate endorphins. I mean, it's not just sweating and exercise alone. Things like meditation actually stimulate what you call endorphins as well. And also, aerobic exercise, even if you don't sweat as much, it does actually stimulate endorphins too. So it's not just the increased sweating alone. But again, because yoga incorporates all those different things, that all of which also stimulate endorphins, they may actually have a several times effect. It's truly a great stress buster and helps in promotion of mental health. And it's great complementary treatment, for people with mental health problems. But I think largely it is a fantastic prevention tool for our mental health. It's one of the best, preventive measures that we can take to prevent mental health.
Okay.
But what about especially for the seniors, they like to do Tai Chi and Qigong and stuff like this.
Yeah,
Does it do the same thing as what yoga does?
It does to some extent. Of course, again, in Tai Chi, there are movements and there are also postures, and it also combines a little bit of meditation and breathing. So when you have that combination in there, yes, then you have an increased positive benefit compared to maybe, just playing badminton, for the whole 1 hour. When you do different things, then it actually increases the benefits.
Interesting.
Yeah, because office workers, when they say they do Tai Chi, it's a whole different thing. I have to Tai Chi away from the boss and everything.
So I guess right now, if people are feeling a bit down in the dumps, yoga might be the way to go. If they're like a little bit depressed at home, if they're still staying at home all this while, they might be able to learn some yoga from the internet. But the problem is there's so many on the internet that you don't know which yoga will work and which wouldn't. Like you were saying earlier, a movement type of yoga would be better, right? And we have to be aware of the breathing as well.
Yes, something that incorporates breathing, something that incorporates mindfulness, meditation. There are yogas that, you do mantras, all this. If you incorporate all of that, then I think you get the better benefit. But in the end, you need to feel happy and comfortable doing it. If it's not your thing and you'd rather jog around the block, then go ahead. But I think, don't get pulled in just because everyone says this is the best and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. To be honest, I don't find any benefit to doing yoga. I've been trying to. Like, I don't really sweat much. And then in the end, like, I don't feel like I
Bel doesn't sweat in general.
Huh?
This woman doesn't. She
I
doesn't
don't
sweat much anyway.
Yeah. No, well, my wife does yoga and I do all the weights and push-ups and sit-ups and stuff. And
no, so your wife wants you to join her doing her yoga as well?
Yeah. So I avoid all the YO things. Yoga, no.
So you don't say yo as well?
Oh, God.
Well, I used to play the yo-yo before, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Okay, we're digressing.
Okay, next.
Okay, our next article. In the UK, the health department they're planning to reopen the schools on the 1st of June, insisting that the school-going children stand to lose a lot more by staying away from school. So the question here is, I guess, will they lose mental capacity as well as suffer more from mental disorders if we continue to keep our children away from school?
Yeah, the problem is we often correlate going to school as a way to prepare, children for jobs and to get them to be intelligent. But it's much more than that. Schools actually help not just in imbibing knowledge, but also in developing social skills, building self-esteem, confidence, building a social conscience, and connectedness, also developing discipline and life skills for the real world and learning to live overall. Online teaching and home-based is deprived of a lot of this, because they get their way through their parents, and parents are also busy, and there's no focus on these learning issues. Through relationships with peers and teachers, children also learn to regulate their emotions and also develop social skills. So this can't really be substituted by social media for most of the things. So yeah, in the long run, I think the deprivation can lead to low self-esteem and isolation, the typical triggers for mental health problems.
Oh, wow. So if we're keeping our children longer from school, they might suffer some form of mental health issues if it's the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we know the duration for that. A few months, I don't think will be too much of a effect. But, if it goes on for a year or more, then I'm sure they can have, some lasting effects.
Okay. But what should be considered right now, doctor, before we reopen our schools?
Well, I think the first and foremost is we need to see a flattening of the curve. And then, the benefits of the MCO and the CMCO before considering even opening this up. Then there has to be SOPs. We need to be sure that the infrastructure is, available to be able to formulate and put these SOPs into practice. Adequate space for social distancing, smaller school classroom sizes, smaller numbers, health, hygiene, and regular hand washing available, sanitizing the facility regularly, making sure that children and staff and teachers wear masks and maintain social distancing, and of course checking for signs such as fever and symptoms among all students on a daily basis. So the same protocol has to be there for teachers and for support staff as well. I think it takes a lot to be able to do all that, and I don't think we should just open up without actually having all that prepared.
I'm a bit confused though, Doc, if you don't mind me asking. So if the kids don't go to school, they they lose out a lot on social skills and whatnot. Then what about those kids who have been homeschooled from the very beginning, though? Are they missing out on some things that regular kids get?
Yeah, so studies in that have actually not been done sufficiently. But, the essential thing is self-esteem is built in kids at two different, very important periods of their life. One, just as they're moving from a toddler to a little child, and people responsible for that are parents. But then later on in their early adolescence and towards teenage years, it is peers. And if they don't have peers to link in and be connected with, then there's going to be real tough time trying to build their self-esteem in that process. And then when they come out into a real world where they have to interact with people, they're lacking in these skills. And so that's what we're seeing in a lot of people, where they're less resilient, they cope with stress poorly, and they're more sensitive to things. And maybe they've been protected in an environment that doesn't give them the chance to actually develop these skills.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that. So for me,
if your mom has always been
stuff, man.
So if your mom has always been teaching you at school, and your mom has been telling you you've done a good job and whatnot, and that's why sometimes I've heard from a cousin who works in HR, a mom actually called up to ask, what questions are you going to ask my son at an interview?
What the hell? Good Lord.
Yeah.
That's the problem that we're facing right now. Helicopter parents.
Yeah, no, I've had parents ask me what's coming up for exams for my son.
All right.
Too much, sometimes,
All right. Our next article is a news piece that I've just read a couple of days ago, where this husband actually tried to run over his wife because they had an argument about family problems. And in my head, I'm thinking, what kind of stressors would actually push a person over the edge like that? Like, this husband is now charged for attempted murder.
Yeah. Actually, domestic violence may occur when one partner feels the need to control and dominate the other. And often this can be triggered by feelings of low self-esteem or extreme jealousy, difficulties regulating anger, or even when they feel inferior to their partner in terms of education or socioeconomic status. Some may have age-old traditional beliefs that women are not equal to men, or others may have an underlying psychiatric disorder, like personality disorder or substance use disorder. There's yet another group where domestic violence can be a learned behavior. And this was, maybe something that they experienced as part of their own upbringing. And, then history repeats itself. It occurs both in males and females. I mean, the victim can be either a male or female, but proportionally higher among females.
But is this considered domestic abuse? Like, he, out of the blue, he just tried to run her over with the car.
Yeah, so this is domestic violence. I mean, this is him acting out against his wife. And so, there are marital issues, but there also may be personality issues or personal things in the relationship that has triggered this.
Okay. Now, what advice would you give to married couples then, Doctor, who are facing some marriage issues at this moment, when it's a difficult and trying time for everyone, whether you're married or not, right? Or with children or not?
Yeah, well, being stuck at home and anxious about work and finances, and also anxious about risk of contracting the virus can all have an impact on relationships, especially when we're forced to spend more time together than ever before. I think it's important to acknowledge this first and then take steps like, one, take care of yourself. Do some stress relieving activities, daily meditation, mindfulness, yoga. We talked about yoga, or even journaling. And then make a plan. Have an open discussion. Create a shared calendar. discuss your concerns. There's the cleanliness of the house, there's the work from home, there's the kids. Okay, work out a regular plan. Revisit that plan regularly. See where you're at on this. So prevent the misgivings and misunderstandings even before they happen. Have that open discussion. It's like you have your team meetings at work. You have that weekly team meeting. Let's do this over this week. We're going to achieve this as our target. Do that at home. There's no reason why we can't actually appreciate the same in our own family. We have our weekly team meeting, get everyone involved, and then have that one-to-one with your spouse as well. Practice appreciation and gratitude. I think that's something that we all fail and often, neglect. We often pick up the bad things. Yes, there are goods and bads about relationship, but there are goods that need to be highlighted. And so we need to, stop being so quick to find fault and highlight the negatives, and spend some time to say thank you and feel grateful. And of course, set some healthy boundaries, like, your workspace. Give each other some space, give each other some time. There needs to be a me time as well in relationships. And I think both sides need to understand that.
Does okay, I'm trying to place this very, very carefully here. Does a level of a country, I mean, based on culture and society, I mean, from developing country to a developed country, do marital problems change based on how the culture is? Maybe in one society, the man is very dominant, and then he expects a wife to accept what he says, and if it doesn't, then there's trouble. But is it different in developed nations where people are all in cities?
Well, I think it comes down to maturity, and that's something that education typically helps people start to develop and build. There are traditional norms, and some of it are relevant and important, and we may need to accept that. Both sides need to understand where they stand. There's some that are given up, some that are embraced. So we build a balance, but both need to be on the same page. You can't have one saying, look, I'm the leader, I'm the boss, you follow. And the other saying, well, I don't like that. That's not what I, sort of paid for. So yeah, I think we're all evolving, and like it or not, maturity, intelligence, and all education, everything changes how we actually perceive things like relationships compared to before.
Interesting, and very interesting tips there. Have a team meeting every week. Now, I think during this MCO and CMCO, if you're feeling like you're too easily angered by every little thing these days, right? Like, for example, a poor internet connection, or a comment from your other half, or the moment you realize you forgot something at your supermarket and you have to go back. Like, every little thing now sort of gives you that, oh, I feel so angry. You know that you are not alone. A lot of people are feeling it right now. And the word that these articles use was irritable, or like very easily upset and angry, right? What is the cause of us suddenly getting so upset or angry over all these little things that maybe perhaps before this rarely riled us up,
Yeah. Well, it all comes down to stress. Stress and anxiety actually causes us to experience altered emotions. And one of them is actually irritability and anger. So there's the Yerkes-Dodson curve, which plots stress on the x-axis and performance on the y-axis. And if you think of a bell-shaped curve, that's most of us. If we have no stress, we don't perform. We can't do much. If we have too much stress, it's the same thing. We underperform. We just can't cope. So we all have an optimum stress level that actually brings out the best performance, the best productivity, and the best performance. And that optimum level varies from one person to another. So that's why, you're in the office, some guy's doing 12-hour shifts and he's, on top of everything, and you just do 8 and you're exhausted. That's because your optimum is different from his or hers. So the problem is when we proceed beyond that optimum level, that's when we start to experience this anger, frustration, irritability, and then eventually go on to breakdown, exhaustion, and things like hypertension, diabetes, and mental health problems. So I think if we are getting upset and angry over little things, we need to relook, do a audit and see, wait a minute, my stress levels have gone way beyond my optimum. I need to recalibrate. I need to do things to help relieve my stress, maybe adjust my lifestyle as well.
Okay. Now, this study in youth, this is in youth while they process sort of a social threat. So this finding suggests that anxiety and irritability are interactive, as in like when the both levels increase, when they are shown like an angry face, there's a decreased connectivity between the amygdala and the medial prefrontal cortex in the brain. So the question here is, if this is a natural occurring brain process, when we are met with some form of a threat, how do we suppress this?
Yeah. Well, actually, this is a study of 115 youths between 8 to 17 who have already affective disorder. They have a mood and anxiety disorder. But it showed that looking at special scans that they had when they had high anxiety and irritability, it was associated with a decreased connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Now, the amygdala in our brain is the seat of your stress center. It's the area for fight, flight, fright. And the prefrontal cortex is your decision-making center in the brain. They're connected. So if you see a snake, then you need to decide, run, shout, ask for help. All of that is sort of, that's the importance of the connection. And when that connection is not available, then you respond very abnormally. So that's the sort of suggestion that there are some people who have lack of connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And when they're exposed to something that is fearful or scary, they actually respond in a different way. They get more irritable and angry or frustrated. And then others are maybe a bit more chill. They know, okay, this is what I got to do. This is how I try and work things out. So, so there is, what it suggests is, that same Yerkes-Dodson stress curve, there are some people who are going to typically get a little bit more angry, frustrated in the light of stress, when they're exposed to stress. But the others who are going to be able to cope with it a lot better and maybe, find ways to deal with it. So, what the study suggests is there are biological factors, not just environmental, that also decide on how people respond and react to stress. Some, more irritable and angry, others a little bit more chilled and able to find a solution. So, sometimes when we understand ourselves, then we can know, we need to make some amendments and changes in our lifestyle and put things in to prevent that stress from overtaking us.
Does the bell curve show age progression though? Because at some point, some people, as they grow older, they can handle stresses and then they're not as angry anymore.
So experience actually increases our resilience. We can, we've experienced more things in our lives. We know how to deal with them. They're repetitive. But there is a degeneration of our mind ability as well. So the brain is an organ which degenerates over time. And as it degenerates, we're not able to, bring in that reserve that is needed to cope with things. So it's, it's a bit of a balance. Although we have more experience in dealing with these things, but we can't cope with it as well as when we were younger.
So when it comes to a biological factor, there's nothing that we can do about it when it comes to the brain?
No, not necessarily. The biological factor means we're more predisposed. But if we actually put things into our life that actually help to reduce that, that escalation of stress, we're not going to get to that level, So, so for some people, they need to work harder on managing their stress and getting it at the optimum or a little less.
Let's get to our last article.
Okay.
And it's all about insomnia and how it may forecast depression and thinking problems in older people. I guess this is a chicken or the egg question that I am curious about. Like, is insomnia a symptom of some kind of mental disorder, or does long-term insomnia cause you to develop a mental disorder?
Yeah. Well, actually, there is an intricate and intimate relationship between sleep and mental health disorders. It is, like you said, a chicken and egg thing. Um, the recent article in the Sleep Journal, yeah, there is a Sleep Journal, actually suggests that chronic insomnia can trigger depression and or anxiety. So if we treat insomnia, prevent it from actually being chronic, we can actually prevent depression and anxiety.
Mm.
But then in depression and anxiety, one of the symptoms is insomnia.
Mm.
You know, it's one of the criteria for making a diagnosis. So typically they occur together with symptoms of depression and anxiety, like low mood and negative thinking and poor appetite, and also all the physical symptoms of anxiety. In depression, the sleep problem is usually terminal insomnia. It means they get to sleep, but they wake up very early and they can't go back to sleep after that. And in anxiety, it's initial insomnia. They can't get into sleep.
Yeah.
So it again, it can be a trigger for depression and anxiety, but anxiety and depression also have insomnia as a symptom.
But how about those people who have no other symptoms but just can't sleep? They are like insomniacs.
Insomnia can be divided into primary or secondary. Primary is where there's no cause. And secondary is where there is a physical or psychological cause for the insomnia. The most common is secondary. It's very rare to have a primary insomnia. That means just out of the blue, you only just can't sleep. So it's important to do a full assessment. And, we need to rule out things like sleep apnea or physical problems or even psychological problems. In fact, psychological problems account for 40% of insomnia. But then the primary insomnia where there's no other factor or no other cause, that, we need to maybe look at different interventions to help people to, try and get some semblance of normal sleep.
Because if they don't sleep, then they will get depressed, right? Even if there's nothing, no underlying mental health issue, if they continue on not being able to sleep, it will somehow push them into depression.
Yep. Yeah. So, typically in my practice, I would normally advise sleep study. That's one way of actually understanding your sleep. Some people report not being able to sleep, but actually, their partners say they're snoring or, so getting a sleep. Yeah, so getting a sleep study will actually help to identify, is it a perception thing? Do they wake up feeling they don't, or is the quality of sleep poor?
Right.
So, there are different factors. And then looking at, sleep hygiene, things like diet, exercise, what you do during the day, all of that plays a role in the quality of your sleep. So making changes there, and then, of course, assessing for other, secondary causes for insomnia as well.
How do you do this sleep study? Like, do you have to put something on their brains and whatnot while they sleep?
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. I might want to volunteer myself because I personally had sleep issues. They're okay right now, pretty under control. But I would love to learn more about what is the underlying issue.
Yeah. So most hospitals do have sleep study labs, and they essentially get you in and make you stay there for the night with all the connections to your heart rate and your brain activity, your EEG, and all of that to assess your sleep. I think there are some that actually monitor while you're at your home as well. It helps to identify what type of sleep pattern you have and whether there's anything that can be rectified, modified.
But sometimes isn't it as simple as somebody just over worrying about things?
Yeah. So that's where sleep hygiene comes in. We sometimes take things for granted, but sleep hygiene actually has steps to help promote good quality sleep. One of the best sites for this is WebMD.com. They've got a sleep hygiene slideshow. They take you through all the different steps on how to, ensure you're going to get a proper sleep as well.